Welcome to Transformative Principle, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principle. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on all the social networks at Jethro Jones, and Transformative Principle is a proud member of the B Podcast Network, the best educational podcasts out there. Check out all our shows at bpodcast.network. Today, I'm excited to have on the show Alyssa Gallagher. She's the author of the book, Embracing Messy Leadership, How the Experience of 20,000 School Leaders Can Transform You and Your School. She is also the co-head of BTS Spark North America. That is a not-for-profit practice focused on bringing executive level coaching to every school leader. Alyssa, welcome to Transformative Principle.
Thanks, Jethro. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And if you remember, Alyssa has been on Transformative Principle before. So there's a link to her other interview from a couple of years ago in the show notes at transformativeprinciple.org. Alyssa, what is your takeaway from our conversation today? What is so valuable that people don't want to miss?
So what I think, there was a lot of parts that were so valuable, Jethro. I love this conversation. What really stands out for me is just wanting leaders to really hear that they're not alone, that while they might feel isolated leading their building or leading their district, the comfort of knowing the challenges that they're experiencing are really universal and having the opportunity to hear about those challenges from other leaders.
So true. I love that. For me, what really stands out is the idea that you have to carve out time to reflect. And it is so easy to go from the second you get there until the second you leave being totally slammed every single day. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can be more in control of yourself and your time. And when you have that ability and you actually take that time, you can find some really powerful things. So pay attention to that part and see how it applies for you in your daily life. We will get to my interview with Alyssa here in just a moment. Well, Alyssa, I think a good place to start is the title of messy leadership. We all know that leadership is messy, but messy means something different to you than probably to the rest of us, right?
Yes, and I would say, part of the reason that we coined the acronym MESSY is because we do believe that all of us in schools and school leadership, there is just an inherent mess to it, right? It's not a nice, neat package of leadership. It's messy in the sense that we're working with a lot of people. People are messy. We're working with a lot of complex problems and all really important work, but all very messy work. With that said, we also coined messy. So we wanted to play on the sense that we believe that leaders do feel, especially school leaders, feel that their work is messy. But what we also wanted to capture in messy leadership is really put forth an aspirational model of school leadership that's much more collaborative, adaptive, and future focused than maybe previous models.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by an aspirational model rather than whatever it was before?
Yeah. So all of our research is grounded in the coaching work that we do at BTS Spark. And the coaching work that our coaches, we have 300 coaches that work with school leaders, it's all around shifting mindset. And so in messy leadership, in each one of the letters, it's an acronym. So each letter stands for sort of an aspect of leadership. For example, M is meaning making, E is emotional connection, S is sensing the future, the second S is seizing momentum, and the Y is probably the most important letter of the acronym. It's your presence. So really speaking to who the leader is. So in each one of the letters of that acronym, there's sort of a foundational mindset, sort of like, hey, this is how you might have been working, but let's shift that frame into a more aspirational mindset.
Well, and the thing that I think about when I think about aspirational is that it's something that we want to achieve at some point, but that it's possible we never will. Do you share that perspective, or do you think people can get to your level of leadership?
I do think that they can is there ever, like, hitting perfection? No, right? So, I think there will always be, as leaders, more to attain, something to aspire to, but we've written it in a way that there are elements that are achievable, and for each letter in the acronym, we've also provided some really practical examples of, "Hey, here's how you can shift. Here's how you can start to shift your mindset, and here are some behaviors that you can take to help you, kind of think of it as a continuum and kind of move your way towards the more aspirational mindset."
Yeah, and the thing that I would add to that is that even if get to that ideal state, by being in that ideal state, you're going to see what is next and what you can do next, because you don't know what you don't know yet, right? And so you have to go to that level, and then you can learn more about whatever it is that you need to accomplish to find success, right?
100%. Yeah. There's always more to learn, always more to grow and do.
Yeah. And it's a never ending process, which I find incredibly fascinating and very fun to think about. What I wanted to do is just dive in a little bit deeper to a few of these. I just sounded like AI, but I
Okay.
promise that was not AI generated. That actually came out of my own mind. I want to get to talking about your presence, because I think that's incredibly powerful, but I want to start with the idea of emotional connection and building trusting relationships with people so that you can give and get feedback as well. Let's talk about emotional connection and what you feel is so vital there.
Yeah, emotional connection, this so just before can I back up a little
Of
bit?
course.
Um, and just say, the messy model, our research in messy really started at the start of the pandemic. We were really intrigued and captivated and curious about what leaders were experiencing. At the time, we were coaching 1,000 leaders. And so we had a really unique perspective into what their experience was. We realized then that yes, hopefully the pandemic is in our rearview mirror soon. It keeps getting a little further and further away, but there will always be for leaders sort of the next crisis, the next hurdle in their community or in their state or nationally or globally that they're having to address. And so we really ended up zooming out and looking at a more holistic view and looking at, we have data from over 20,000 school leaders we've coached. And so I think that's really important because emotional connection, when we think about leaders, our expectation of leaders, maybe even a decade ago, might have been if you asked people, what's important in a leader, there would have been a sense of sort of leaders having a professional veneer. It's business here. We leave home, we leave our personal outside of our workplace. Leaders feeling the need to establish themselves as sort of larger than life or less human, perhaps. And what we found in our research is that really what leaders, the most successful leaders are doing is they're establishing this emotional connection. There's a blurring of line between who I am as a person is how I'm going to show up as a leader. And so personal and professional are more blurred. The leaders that are most successful are the leaders that are willing to be more vulnerable, are willing to kind of co-create and have these deeper, meaningful relationships with people on their staff and on their team. And so it's kind of the uncommon sense. Sometimes leaders, one of the things that leaders really struggle with is having the courage to have really deep and honest conversations. And yet the irony in that is having those deep and honest conversations are actually what builds trust. And so that's one example is the shift in emotional connection is sort of shifting from as a leader, and this is a good place to be like, I'm focused on my relationships with my team and all of my stakeholders, to like an elevated, more aspirational is like, I have the courage to really build deeper and more honest relationships within my school community. I'm not just going to build this like culture of nice to suffice, right? Like I'm actually going to tackle some really hard things, but do it in a emotionally responsive way that builds trust and builds greater connections.
Yeah. Boy, you said so much in there that I want to just pick apart, but I'll have to save that for later. One of the things that you hinted at is this idea of authenticity, and that authenticity comes when you are vulnerable with people. They want to see the real you. And I think the way that we have thought about that before is that we've thought too much that the leader is this perfect caricature of whatever our ideal imagination of this is. And we have to recognize that they are a real person just like us. And we have to accept that. That goes both ways, though, with those that we're leading and with those that are leading us. And the real power comes from that when you can be honest and real about who you are and what you're experiencing without it being about judgment or about, well, you can't do this because of whatever. So, one of the guests I've had on the show is Craig Randall, who does trust based observations. And he's
Okay.
taking this idea of building trust, being authentic, and being real with people and taking it into the classroom for observations and tying it into the evaluation framework. And it's so much more powerful because it starts with the emotional connection rather than starting with the rubric or the evaluation model or whatever it is, so that the point is trust. And when the
Right.
point is trust, then you can do incredible things. Can you share a story or two where that trust has been there and how that emotional connection has been there and that's made it possible for people to do things that they didn't think were possible before?
Yeah, let me think if a specific example comes to mind. I love, and I'll have to look into Craig Randall's work. I love that trust equation is being brought into the observation and evaluation lens, because I think so many times it's set up to be sort of this scary, negative, judgmental experience. I remember being a teacher and having my principal walk in, or even being a principal at a school and having my superintendent come to visit and feeling this judgment that like you clam up. And, with emotional connection, when the trust is there, it's sort of capturing heart and head, right? Of we learn best from people when that connection is there. And the other part of emotional connection is realizing that when we have these honest and real conversations, it's not all feedback is all not all negative, right? It should be balanced as well. And so we in messy leadership, in the emotional connection, we share some tools of around how can you really dig in and have greater empathy. We use what we call the presence triangle. And how can you start to really think about the other person and in how you're delivering your message, right? And sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's body language, sometimes there's so many pieces that go into having somebody be receptive to an open and real conversation. But I just know that it's so much more powerful and meaningful when both parties can come to the table with authenticity. But the stage has to be set by the leader because of the power dynamic.
Absolutely. And the leader, because of the power dynamic, they have to go sometimes even more extreme to say it's safe for you to do this too, because nobody wants to admit to their leader that they're not perfect, even though they know. We still don't want to admit it and we want to hide behind it. Tell us a little bit more about the presence triangle.
Yeah, so the presence triangle it's a tool that we use. One of the things our goal in writing messy leadership, one, most importantly, is for leaders to see themselves in it. I want leaders not to feel isolated. I know that, having been both a site level leader and a district level leader, at different points, I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome, with thinking that, am I the only leader that's struggling with this? So we want leaders to feel seen. We start by uncovering sort of the top challenges that leaders globally are experiencing. And then our goal is to provide very action oriented tools. So, one of the tools in emotional connection, you asked around the presence triangle, it's a simple tool where we encourage people to think about maybe a challenging relationship they have, or maybe a problem, a conflict that they know is brewing. And it's sort of a process. It's a three-step process they go through. Of first, kind of like taking a deep breath and thinking about that relationship, thinking about how they view the person, their relationship, kind of getting clarity there, and then moving kind of, and even sometimes physically moving. And now really thinking from the perspective of the other individual. What are they, if they're looking back at you, what are they seeing? What are they thinking? And then a third place is to then step outside of the relationship as an outside observer and look at the leader and the individual. It makes so much more sense with a visual, but you get the point. And then, as an outside observer, what do you notice about this relationship? And then what do you want to do about it? So it's a very quick exercise that really can be used to improve any relationship. What I love about that is it's not only in the workplace, it can be used, with your partner, with your kids, with friends. Like, we're all human beings. And so what we're trying to bring out here too is the human side of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you we went a little bit deeper there, because I think that ties into the piece about your presence and how important it is for you to know what is holding you back. It's if you are doing the presence triangle and you're thinking about yourself, and then you're thinking about the other, and then you're thinking about the outside perspective, and you can't see their perspective or the outside perspective, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere. And so you have to be able to see what's holding you back so that you can overcome that and be the kind of leader that your people need. What else should we know about the your presence part of messy leadership?
Yeah, so the first part of your presence, I think, for leaders is just to know how much like you matter. You matter, you're not alone. You bring incredible strengths and gifts to this role that are really needed. Leadership, we need you. Like, schools need you, districts need you, our kids need you, and you're not alone. There's support that's available. So really interesting when we uncovered, coaching creates a very confidential space. Leaders get to bring authentic problems, what they're struggling with, into these coaching sessions. And so on the back end of this, we have the anonymous data to show us, well, what are leaders really struggling with? And really kind of interesting. And this leads into your presence of some of the top challenges that leaders struggle with. Number one, and we kind of touched on this a little bit already, is the courage to have difficult conversations, right? Just simply the courage.
Hmm.
And this is across all levels of leaders. This is not just, brand new assistant principals or brand new principals. This is across all levels, all number of years of experience, courage to really tackle the difficult conversations. The second the second theme is empowering and coaching others, not running around and fixing everybody's problems. I think in some ways, as educational leaders, we've almost taken servant leadership too far,
Hmm.
that we're actually like depleting ourselves. And I think that's why, leadership, educational leadership, we've created these roles that we expect them to be superhuman almost. And it's exhausting, you know?
If I can
The
just
third,
get back to the
yeah,
third in a
jump in.
second, but that idea of servant leadership taken too far, that is a very real issue, where I've coached some principals recently who feel like they cannot ask their teachers to do anything besides teach day to day. They can't ask them to take leadership roles. They can't ask them to support other initiatives within the building. And it's such a missed opportunity. One of the good examples of that was during COVID, that the principal needed to do all the contact tracing. And that is not a good job for the principal to be doing, because they have a lot of other things that they need to do, and they should not be sitting on the phone or at their desk all day long. And yet, that was what they need to do. And a principal told me just last week, I could not ask anybody else to do it. Who else would be able to do that besides me? And I was like, I can think of a lot of people who could do that. And that's not you saying this is the best use of my time. That's you saying this is a task that needs to be done. And I don't feel comfortable asking anybody else, which is a leadership issue. That is not a process issue. That's a leadership issue of you not feeling confident to ask anybody else. And anything that's good that we take too far then becomes bad. And being a pleaser and saying, I don't want to put anybody out, and so I'm going to just do this all. And then they end up working themselves completely to death, and not ever taking any time for themselves to make sure that they are there and ready to serve others in the way that they actually need to be served, not in the way that the leader thinks they need to be served, even though the leader could be taking away autonomy and ability from other people as well. So that's just my little tiny soapbox. We could go on about that if you want, but you can go back to number three.
You are so spot on with that. You know, I do think that it's gotten worse, our expectations of leaders. And I think leaders, because most leaders care so much about their staff, they care so much about their students, there is this sense of, let me take things off your plate. But unfortunately, there's no more space on their back, right? And so that is, you know, it's interesting. You talked about being a pleaser. One of the things that we share in your presence is we share 6 mind traps that really get in the way of leaders being their best self. One of the mind traps is pleaser. Like if you're trying to make everybody happy, like that's actually going to interfere with your ability to lead. And there's 6 of them, but the 2 most common mind traps among educational leaders are pleaser and martyr,
Mm, interesting.
right? So really interesting to think about. And so and we see this in coaching. Leaders are bringing this to their coach saying like, I can't do it all. I need help. I need to figure out how to empower others, how to co-collaborate with others. I can't fix everybody's problems. That's the number 2 theme. Do you want to hear a few of the other themes?
Let me say one more thing real quick, because you talk about taking things off of people's plates, and I agree. We need to take things off of people's plates, and rather than putting it on somebody else's plate, we need to really seriously consider if it needs to be on anybody's plate at all. And and that's not a comfortable conversation, because that pleaser in each of us is also saying, I can't say that this is not important, even though I may know that it's not important. I can't say that because I need to be a good soldier or need to play along or whatever the case is. But the reality is, we're doing a lot of things that are just not worth our time or energy. They're not worth anybody's time or energy, but we still do them because that's the way we've always done it.
100%. And I think Peter DeWitt has some really interesting work right now on I think it's de-implementation,
Uh-huh.
right? Like let's like de-implement some of this stuff.
Yeah. All right.
But
Let's
yeah.
hear some of the others.
Okay, so the third theme that leaders are asking for support in is how do I really engage others in influencing a change of practice? How do I influence other people's? You know, that's really, in most cases, leaders get through things done through influence. How do I influence others to change their practice or mindset? And so we provide some tools there. Number 4, lack of confidence. Lack of confidence, questioning their abilities, and overcoming imposter syndrome. You know, feeling like, am I really the one that's supposed to be here? Like, is somebody else better suited to do this job? It really is a big issue for leaders. And so we dive into that in the Your Presence chapter. And then the fifth theme is slowing down. You know, our most leaders feel like they are just reactive from the moment they arrive to school to the moment they finally close their laptop, probably too late at night at home, sending that last email, that they're just reacting, reacting, reacting. And so this is really a theme of slowing down to move from being so task oriented to being more people oriented and reframing how we spend our time. So actually the second S, seizing momentum, really is in helping leaders reframe. The shift here is about you actually have more freedom with your time than you realize.
Yeah.
You know, we all know, and I'm not going to pretend that leaders aren't juggling, you know, 2,000 balls all at the same time, but really trying to understand which ones can you drop that'll bounce. You can pick them back up later, and which ones will absolutely shatter, you know, that you have to keep. And the number that you have to keep up is probably a lot less than what leaders are expecting of themselves.
Yes, absolutely. That is so true, and it's something that as I've coached principals myself for so long, that's something that comes up again and again. I can't not do this because I need to get it done. And one of my practices is I don't do anything unless the district asks for it 3 times. They have to ask for it 3 times for me to really take it seriously, because I've spent too much time responding to what they say they need and them not using it for whatever they said was so urgent 2 weeks ago. And and that is, probably not good advice to give to people, but at the same time, like, just recognize that somebody saying I need this report or I need this information or whatever, it really is not your problem if they feel like they need it. And sometimes you have to say, this isn't the necessity right now. You don't need all of our discipline data from the last 2 years because it's all in our student information system. You have access. You can go pull that if you really need it. And that's not a comfortable thing to say, but that is sometimes exactly what needs to be said so that people recognize that they can't you can't have all these balls in the air, and that's one of those balls that can drop and bounce for sure. And I love that analogy of some drop and bounce and some drop and shatter. You can't let the ones that drop and shatter fall, or you can, and then you just got to clean up the glass, and that's a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, and so we offer some tools in seizing momentum for how, a prioritization matrix. How do you really prioritize what's urgent, what's needed, what can be delegated, and what doesn't need to be done
Hmm.
to really help? And so, the way that the messy framework and the way that we approach writing this book is it's meant to be something that leaders can dive in and out of. We actually don't recommend reading it from start to finish. Maybe because I was a big fan of choose your own adventure books
Hmm.
back in 3rd grade, but that's, every leader has their own unique context with which they're leading. And we wanted this to be an actionable kind of practical toolkit where you can think about the problem that you're experiencing and dive into that. Pick up some tools that you can implement very easily. Here are some real quotes from other leaders who have either used that tool or expressed frustration around the same problem. So you kind of also build this awareness of I'm not alone. Leaders everywhere are struggling with this prioritization of time, or I'm not the only leader that's having a crisis of confidence right now.
Yeah.
It happens, and here's something I can do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that you're making me think about a lot is the idea of judgment versus blameless discernment, and how so many times we have this judgment of ourselves or of those that we work with where we feel like we we need to judge the situation, judge the intention, judge the motives, and really what we need to do is blamelessly discern what happened. And the difference is that judgment carries penalties with it, that when you're judging someone, you are making a condemnation about what they did, why they did it, and assuming that you know the thought process behind that. When you're blamelessly discerning, you're recognizing this person did this and this was the result. And if I didn't like it, I need to do something about it. If I did like it, I should probably tell them that was a good job, and having that different approach. And where that has been really powerful for me is helping principals see when you are blamelessly discerning versus judging, you don't get tied up in the drama of it. You don't get caught up in the emotion of the situation, and you're able to take a step back and see it for what it is and see a different perspective. And you don't have to then make people feel badly because they acted in a certain way or didn't live up to your expectations or whatever the case may be. And it's just a really freeing way to look at things that you can't change it anyway, so judging somebody for it doesn't really help.
Yeah, can I offer a slight add-on to
Please.
that? One of the things that we know from our research and a tool that we share with leaders is that we all actually have two voices in our head that stop us from being our best version of a leader. One voice is the judge, and the judge is judging ourselves. So, you think about any recent interaction that you've had or a meeting you've been at and you leave, the judge in you is saying, "Oh, well, that was a really stupid comment," or "Why did you do that?" or "What were you thinking?" You also have a pessimist voice in your head. And so we encourage leaders to get real clear on these voices and to call them out and to say, "We know this is happening. What's your internal judge saying? And what's your internal pessimist saying?" And then to zoom out and go, "Okay, but what's actually true?"
Hmm.
We all have a realist voice too. What's actually true? And if it's not true, then we can go ahead and squash those. We can diminish the realist and the pessimist voice that lives within all of
Mm.
us.
Yeah, thank you. I like that. That's good. So, last question. You got a lot of experience, got a lot of advice. What is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you, Alyssa?
One thing. One thing I think that the easiest and the hardest that leaders can do is carve out time, time to reflect. I really think that spending whatever amount of time, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes might be a luxury, but honest, carved out reflection time to reflect on why we do this work we do, the good that we've done in the day. I think so often, well intentioned leaders, we're so focused on being task oriented and our to do list that is 2 miles long that we're not giving ourselves sort of the care and feeding that we need as a leader to keep us really connected to the why of the work and all of the good that we are doing.
Beautifully said. I just want to add a little bit to that. In that time to carve out to reflect, slowing things down and not feeling like you gotta, make every decision right this moment. You mentioned that before, and I just want to reiterate that. Carve out time to reflect and slow down and think before you act. That's so powerful. So all right, Alyssa, thank you so much. This was great chatting with you. The book is Embracing Messy Leadership. You can get it anywhere books are sold, and there's a link to it in the show notes at transformativeprinciple.org. Alyssa, thanks so much for being part of Transformative Principle today.
Thanks, Jethro.